Hello, my name is Chloe. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the books I've unhauled lately. I love doing these videos. I have been getting so good at unhauling books. If you guys have been around for any length of time, you know I have an insane book collection, and I just need to be making sure that if I don't love the books I'm reading, that I get them out of my collection and make space for all of the new ones that I haul. I started this next list that I'm going to run through on the 1st of October, and I'm currently filming on the 3rd of December, and I have about 35 books to talk to you about, so I've been doing pretty good on the unhauling. Some of these books I haven't read for a while and have just finally decided now is the time to let them go. Some of them have never been read and I've accepted that I am not going to get to them, and most of them I think are ones I've read recently and just not loved to the point of keeping them. You might know if you've seen these videos before, if I hold a book up, that means at the point of filming it is still in my possession and it is up for grabs. So if you like the sound of the book or you've been looking for it, let me know, reach out, and I will make sure I can get it into your hands. I'm pre-filming because I am gonna still be in the US when you see this video, so apologies if any of the books I hold up are no longer available, but please do let me know if you're interested. If I put a book cover on the screen, that means it has already moved on into someone else's hands. And the first example of that is A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating by Sarah Hawley. I read this at the start of October and it just didn't really knock my socks off, so I didn't need to keep it for my forever collection. Saying that, it was still a pretty good book. I'm glad I gave it a go, but yeah, I just don't need to hold on to it. Next up is The Jigsaw Man by Nadine Matheson. This is an adult detective thriller, and I've accepted since reading this that detective thrillers really aren't my thing. I actually ended up listening to the audiobook of this and didn't really enjoy it a whole lot. Next up we have The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This was the Chloe's Crime Scene Corner pick for October, and I did give it 4 stars in the end, but it's just not one that I'm ever going to revisit. So I enjoyed this one, but it's just not something I need to keep on my shelves, and I know a lot of people in the book club did also enjoy it. In my opinion, this author just has a confusing way of writing that you either love or hate, and I've decided that her storytelling is great. She has some really fun ideas, but I don't think I love the delivery. Next up we have Rouge by Mona Awad. I was sent this one by the publisher, and I was intrigued because I read Bunny, loved the idea of the story, but was completely confused, and this one might have been more confusing than Bunny, which is crazy to say. I was not a massive fan, but I've seen mixed reviews around the bookish internet for this. Next up is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. This is a YA contemporary, like magical realism feel book. It got very popular about a year ago, I think it was, and I finally decided to pick it up, and sadly I didn't have that emotional connection with it that so many people seem to have. This is a devastating story of our main character whose boyfriend Sam has died, and she calls his phone one day after his death to listen to his answer phone, and he actually comes through and she can talk to him. So it's an emotional one, but it didn't hit me in the feels. Next up we have The Burning by Laura Bates, which I think is quite an interesting take on a YA contemporary, adding in some historical elements. I'm glad I read this one, but it just didn't really do anything new for me. It's about a girl who goes to a new school with a completely new identity, and the reason why she's done that is secret. We obviously find out why she has moved schools, and at the same time she's doing a historical project about an old witch that potentially lived in her building. So it was interesting, it's just not something I'm going to read again. Next up we have We Played With Fire by Catherine Barter, which is a take on the Fox sisters who held like seances with the dead and convinced people they were talking to their dead relatives. I hadn't actually heard of these ladies before, and then they've come up again in the ghost hunting discourse because of if anyone knows what I'm talking about, then please chat to me because I'd love to chat about it. But they've come back up again in the discourse about Sam and Colby, the paranormal investigators, and the new communicators with the dead that are being compared to the Fox sisters a hell of a lot. I didn't love this book. I ended up listening to the audio and I just didn't really care. I don't feel like a lot actually happened in this whole book. It was more getting to know the girls and I just wasn't interested. So unfortunately I didn't love this. Next up, we've got How to Kill Men and Get Away With It by Katie Brent. I did really like this book. I think I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars. And I've actually unhauled that straight to the mother-in-law, who I'm going to give it to on my travels. And I'm hoping that she likes it just as much as I did. Next up, we have The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This is a really easygoing romance. We're following a wedding planner who is put on a work assignment with her best man from her failed wedding, who also happens to be the groom's brother. It's a romance, so of course romance ensues. I just didn't love this one completely, so I decided to get rid of it. We then have Dear Mrs. Bird by AJ Pierce, and this was the start of my brutal unhaul, where I looked through my physical TBR, and if I wasn't excited about reading a book, I've just unhauled it. So I picked up Dear Mrs. Bird in a charity shop and I just knew that I was never going to get around to it, so I unhauled it. That is the same story for How to Kidnap the Rich by Raul Rayner. This sounded interesting at the time, but as time's gone on, I know that I'm not going to read it. It does not appeal to me too much. It looks cool and it's, you know, it's a funky cover, it's a cool concept, but it's just not going to happen, so best get it out. We then have one that I was holding on to for, I mean, a pretty good reason, but we have Unraveller by Frances Harding. I actually won this copy at Yalc last year, and it wasn't that I kind of requested this one, it was spin a wheel and if you win you get a copy of Unraveller. And yeah, it just doesn't appeal to me. Like, it kind of didn't at the time, and I thought, yeah, well, one day I'll be in the right mood. I've never been in the right mood. It's been over a year, so it can go. Next up, we have Don't Breathe a Word by Jordan Taylor, and I'm still kind of sad about this one, but it is the right thing to do. This is the first ARC I was ever sent by Harper 360 YA, and I did really like it. I think I gave it 4 stars, or even 4.5, and this is about an elite boarding school that has secrets. I did really enjoy it. I'm just never going to read it again, and I would prefer to pass it on. We then have another charity shop purchase, which is just never going to get read, if I'm honest with myself, and that is John Dies at the End by David Wong. This is apparently a weird horror. It's quite long, and this highlighter mark has annoyed me since I got it. So I just know it's never going to happen. Like, even on the back we have gruesome, like, body horror. I'm sure it's fantastic, but I'm never in the mood for this, and I'm never going to be. Next up, I don't want to upset anyone with this one, but we have The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. I did read The Thursday Murder Club and I did like it, but nothing is pulling me to reading the sequel at all. I see it often on different audiobook apps, so I know that I could pick it up via audio if I really want to, but yeah, nothing is drawing me in to picking up this book. We then have Second Chance Summer by Morgan Matson. I decided after reading a couple of Morgan Matson's books over the last couple of months that I'm really not a fan of the writing style. I just don't vibe with it at all. And rather than putting myself through some hefty YA contemporaries, I should just unhaul them. It's better to unhaul it than read it and not enjoy it. So I couldn't tell you anything about this, and we're going to leave it that way. It's going to go. I'm sorry that I don't like Morgan Matson, but I'm moving on. Next up we have Gingerbread, and I picked this one up for $1 in an American like bookshop, and they have a used book section at the back where hardbacks were $2 and paperbacks were $1. So yeah, I picked this up because it looked familiar. Am I ever going to read it? No. No. This one makes me sad, but I need to accept it. This is Home by Mark Ballabon, and this is one that I got at Yalc last year. It is signed and personalised to me, but yeah, nothing is making me want to read this, I'm afraid. It is such a gorgeous book. There is really, really lovely artwork in here. Like, look how good that is. I wasn't completely sold on it, but I met the author at Yalc and he was such a sweet man that myself and Kayla were talking to him for a very long time. He genuinely seemed like such a sweetheart, and he made me want to buy his book, but after holding on to it for over a year, I just know that I'm not going to read it. I've looked at the reviews, and all of the negative reviews have things that I would likely agree with, just from past reading experience. So I think even if I was to read this, I wouldn't like it. So I'm gonna unhaul it. Next up, my other Morgan Matson is The Unexpected Everything. Same reasons, I don't need another Morgan Matson in my life. And if I check this, it's actually over 500 pages long. A 500-page YA contemporary where I haven't liked any of the author's previous work, probably not a good idea, and I'm going to unhaul. This one does make me sad because I did love it. It's a 4.5-star read, but I have reasons. It is Geekerella by Ashley Poston. In my last unhaul, I unhauled The Princess and the Fangirl, which is book 2. And looking back onto this one, I just wasn't that excited about it. I wasn't ever thinking of rereading it, and it's just not something that I'm like ever think about. I really want the books I keep to be ones that I'm going to pick up again in the future. I don't want to keep a book for no reason. So even though I did rate this highly back in 2021, I don't need to keep it. Next up, we have Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which is a contemporary literary fiction style book that I picked up because I recognised it from Rachel's channel. I have since then accepted that I should not be reading Rachel's favourite books because I don't often like them. I'm not saying I wouldn't have liked this book, but every time I went to pick it up, I was thinking, what if I don't like it? And I disappoint Rachel. So I ended up putting it off for the longest time and then wasn't excited about it, so I unhauled. We then have The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. After reading The Family Upstairs and not loving it, I had read some Lisa Jewell in the past and never loved any of it. There was one I liked but didn't love, and I just said that I don't need any more Lisa Jewell in my life. At the time I made that statement, I had just hauled this from a charity shop, so I decided to hang on to it just in case, and now I've come to the conclusion that I really just don't need this. Next up, we have 2 related books, and that is Finding Sky and Stealing Phoenix by Joss Sterling. These are the first 2 books in the Benedict Brothers series. I enjoyed book 1 more than book 2. I have read book 1 twice now and then carried on with the series, and just neither of these really spark joy in me anymore, so I said it was brutal. These are unhauled. We then have quite a few I've passed on already, the first one being A Children's Bible by Lydia Millett. I will have talked about this one not too long ago in my November wrap-up. This was a very weird novella, end of the world vibes, children versus adults. I did like it, but I was never going to read it again. Same with Earthlings. This was a very strange novella about a group of people who believed that they were aliens and they were ditched amongst the Earthlings and they didn't have to abide by their rules. It was very odd and I came out of it so like, what on earth did I just read? But I didn't hate it. I'm never going to reach for it again. Then we have Magma. This was also such an interesting read. This was a different take on a literary fiction romance vibe. Lots of messages about unhealthy relationships and coping mechanisms. I really did like it. I thought I was going to keep it and read it forever, but I didn't like it enough to hold on to this book, so passed it out into the world. I think that's my main thing, is when I really don't like these books, I have enough books that I feel like if I just minorly love it, it would be better spent passed on to somebody else to enjoy it, if that makes any sense. Next up, we have Those Who Lie by Diane Jeffrey, and I just didn't have the best time with this book. This is an adult mystery thriller, and although it wasn't awful, it was a lot of different mysteries thrown up in one, and I could not get behind the storyline at all. I just wasn't a fan, okay? Then we have A Fur Love Story by Lone Lee. This is a very cute YA contemporary. I came out of it though not really loving it. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. Very Romeo and Juliet feel, with a young boy and girl whose families have rival Vietnamese restaurants and they are not allowed to be friends, let alone date. So when they start dating, they realise they're going to have to solve the family feud. Next up, we have 13 Minutes by Sarah Pinborough. This was the oldest thriller on my TBR. I finally read it in November and I just didn't love it, which is really sad. It's described as Mean Girls for the Instagram age, and I would definitely agree. But one thing about it is technology has moved on a little bit since 2016 for teenagers. So I felt like some of the references might have been slightly out of touch. Technology in any age is hard to write about and stay relevant, but yeah, just the Instagram, iPhone setting out out generation is quite hard. We've got a group of friends. One of the girls is found dead, basically, in a river. She dies for 13 minutes and is revived by the doctors. Straight away, she starts to feel like her friends could have been responsible. Then we have Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam. This is one of my least favourite books of the year, and I just really wasn't a fan of it. It's a very atmospheric, end of the world, but just vibes, no drama. I needed some drama, so yeah, this one's going. I then have Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. This was a YA horror that I go into quite a bit more detail in my wrap up, but essentially I really liked the vibes, I really liked the idea of the story, but I struggled so much to picture things in my head that it brought the rating down for me, and I didn't think rereading it was gonna help. Then we have Comfort Me with Apples. This was a very interesting novella. It's described as horror, but I don't think I'd go as far as to call it horror. I guess what else would it be? I did like this, but it went a way I wasn't expecting, and it's not that it was bad, I just didn't really think I'd ever need to read it again. It was weird, don't get me wrong, it was weird. We now have two books that were actually gifts from the same person over different periods of time, both of which I'm now unhauling, so I'm really sorry about that. But I am so grateful I had the opportunity to read them, which is what I'm so thankful for. The first one is The Call. This one is a YA horror with some action. I really didn't vibe with it too much. I didn't quite understand what was going on by the time we got to the end, and I wanted some more clear-cut answers. So yeah, I wasn't a massive fan of this one. I should say, actually, now I've made that statement, I will never unhaul a gift if I have not read it, because I feel like that is a massive kick in the teeth. But unhauling a book that was a gift that I've already read, I have read the book, so I feel like that's okay. If I held on to every book I'd read, my little library wall would be completely overflowing. So I do my best to love the books I receive as gifts, but sometimes I have very bad taste when I put them on my wish list. So the last book I have unhauled in this time period before I start my next unhaul list is Out Behind the Barn. This is a horror novella, and I didn't hate it, but I feel like this would have worked best at double the length. It's only 100 pages. I'm feeling like I needed at least another 50. We're on a farm, and there are two young boys who don't quite have a normal life, and the woman who's looking after them is rather suspicious. It's an interesting concept. I like how it was done, but I feel like we needed some more answers about what was happening. So yeah, I'm not going to read it again. And there we have it. That is a quick fire 35-ish book unhaul. As I said, please let me know if you are interested in any of these books, or if you have any opinions on them that you agree or disagree with. I would love to chat to you down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.